Your understanding score is really low if you're narrowing everything down to a 50-50. You're just not getting it.
Mhm.
We have to turn zeros into ones. Hello and welcome to episode 478 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I'm Nathan Fox. With me is Ben Olson. We're the co-founders of LSATdemon.com and the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. You can be LSAT famous by sharing news or asking questions on our website, thinkinglsat.com. Coming up, we have October LSAT scores. They get released as we record. They get released tomorrow. That's October 23rd. You're listening to this. October scores are already out. We'd love to know how you did. So again, go to thinkinglsat.com and just drop us a note. We have a free class coming up on Saturday, November 2nd. That is a review of Prep Test 141. If you want to do that test ahead of time, you can show up and do a free class with Demon tutor Kaylee. Kaylee is a very popular newer teacher with us. Again, that's Saturday, November 2nd, if you want to do a free class with Kaylee reviewing Prep Test 141. If you don't have time to do the prep test beforehand, that's fine. You can probably still get something out of it. Just show up and work your way through the questions with Kaylee. But if you have time to do the test beforehand, I think you'll get probably more out of it. Just go to lsatdemon.com/free if you would like to sign up for that class or get notified about all of our upcoming classes. Ben, we have an email here at the top of the agenda from Julian. The subject is starting from square one.
Hi, Ben and Nathan. I'm beginning my preparation for the LSAT. When starting, what common mistakes have you seen students make, and what are some successful methods you have seen your students implement early that led to an examination gain of plus 170? Thanks and keep up the good work. Jules.
Well, you can't get a plus 170 gain. That's not a thing. I think Julian. Yeah, well, we know what he wants. He wants a 170 or higher.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you want to tell somebody who is shooting for a 170 or higher? Does that even matter? I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't matter. For anyone starting their LSAT preparation, boy, there's several things that come to my mind right away. But one thing is the the fundamental process, the fundamental steps to making progress on the test are quality over quantity, which means do one question and then review it until you understand it, and then do another question. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again and keep focusing on learning from those questions and the mistakes you make as you do them. And I don't know how long that process will take, but if that's what you're 100% focused on, doing actual questions and then reviewing them as carefully as possible, you will make progress.
Yeah. We regularly get people 20 points or more improvement from their diagnostic. And the way we do that is by talking to them about actually understanding the test. You're just not going to score 170 plus if you don't understand the test. You're not going to score whatever your goal is. You're not going to get there if you don't commit to this idea that, okay, I can actually understand this stuff. So yeah, LSAT 101 for me, it's funny because other LSAT companies or like, when I used to work for somebody else,
Mhm.
the first LSAT lesson was all this like formal logic and stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
it, it's like,
Or how much
and,
time you have per question.
oh yeah,
or-
absolutely. Like, yeah, the math of like, well, there's 35 minutes in the section and there's 25 questions. So you have to do every question in 85 seconds or less in order to finish the section on time. It's like,
yeah.
okay. And those were back in the days when we used to struggle to get people a 10-point improvement.
Hmm.
Now at LSAT Demon, we do it in a different way. And we easily get people 20-point improvements by talking to them about, okay, look, the test basically makes sense. It means what it says what it means. You just have to read it really carefully to understand what's in the record exactly. And what's the question asking you exactly?
Mhm.
And that answer that you're about to pick, do you understand how it, like every word is, you're vouching for it? Yes, this answer actually answers that question based on this record. And if you learn how to do that, then the questions start to solve themselves almost. All you have to do is really just understand it, and it's the answer becomes clear. So forget the idea that you're ever going to finish the sections, Jules. That's not your goal. Your goal is to understand one question at a time.
Yeah,
It's Go ahead.
yeah, well, one thing that, oh, Francesca, she's since left, but she said to me, one thing that she got out of this podcast was that the most important advice was to slow down on the LSAT and in your law school application timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never put those two together, but that's fundamentally what we're all about. Slow down in your preparation, slow down on the test. Don't rush the application cycle. There is no reason to do so. The irony is that by slowing down, you end up going faster and more importantly, much better.
Francesca is now a 3L at Penn, by the way.
Oh wow. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I just had to look it up and see what she's up to these days. She did a 2L summer associate at Wachtell, and she is finishing up, I guess, her third year at Penn.
Hmm.
Um, I want to talk about something that we touched on last week, and
Okay.
we've since fleshed it out a little bit. This idea of an understanding score
Sure. Okay.
or heuristic.
Mhm.
Um, the demon understanding heuristic, duh for short,
Yeah.
is is the idea that what you do is you take your mistakes and you multiply it by 2,
Mm. Mhm.
and that's the questions that you didn't really understand. So, Jules, when you're just starting out, it's real easy for you to like sort of pat yourself on the back about all the ones you got right and not really worry about the ones you got wrong, or kind of cursory review the ones that you got wrong.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, got it. Okay, I see why the right answer is right there. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, this one, you take like 30 seconds to review the question. Yeah, okay, got it.
Mhm.
But then your improvement isn't as fast as it could be, because what you're not realizing is that what students do is they narrow questions down to a 50-50 a lot. And they don't realize that when you narrow it down to a 50-50, you miss it half the time and you really notice those ones. But you're not noticing the 50% that you got right. And you just think, oh, yeah, okay, I got that one right. Yeah, got it.
Mhm.
So the idea of the demon understanding heuristic, or the duh,
Mhm.
it's like if you did 10 questions and you got 8 of them right, you look at that and you go, yeah, 80% accuracy. But you have to double your mistakes, because there's ones that the 2 that you missed indicate that there's probably another 2 that you got right with a little bit of luck.
Yep. That
So if you got
50-50.
Yeah, so if it's 80% accuracy on your questions attempted, your understanding score is actually more like 60%.
Yeah.
And when you embrace this idea that, like, okay, so I am getting some of them right without really understanding them. Now that doesn't mean that you need to go back and like thoroughly review all the ones you got right, because the
Mhm.
test will tell you the stuff you don't understand. So you can, I think, just review your mistakes. That's fine if you want to just review your mistakes. But I want you to really thoroughly review your mistakes and understand that there's something there that that question wants to teach you. And it's not just this question, it's other questions where you might have got it right, but you didn't really get it. And this question is giving you an opportunity to hone your understanding.
Mhm. And do you want to say any more about that,
Yeah.
or do you want to go with this next question? It
Yeah.
seems
Let's do it.
related, I guess.
Oh, okay.
It's from anonymous. It says the subject is struggling with well, I don't know how related it is, but struggling with understanding answer choices.
Okay. It says, "Hey guys, I'm able to make predictions and summarize the stimulus." We don't say stimulus here. We just say passage.
Hmm.
Okay. So I'm able to make predictions and summarize the passage effectively, but I sometimes struggle with understanding the answer choices when it comes to questions. Okay. Even with a solid prediction, the wording of the answer choices can be odd and intentionally confusing, making it hard to apply my predictions. Any advice on how to better understand the answer choices specifically, since it seems the LSAT writers make the wording quite unintuitive on the answer choices? Thanks. Okay, so I totally understand what Anonymous is asking here. It is true that they will sometimes obfuscate correct answers by just they kind of intentionally shitify them.
Hmm.
Add in a double negative when there was a clearer way to state it, but they just add a double negative in there to make it harder to decipher as correct. The
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
the thing I want to encourage before we even look at, we're going to do a sample question here and maybe we can demonstrate how to translate answer choices.
Yeah.
But one thing I really want to push here to Anonymous is that if you're struggling with understanding answer choices, that's okay. The superpower is I want you to refuse to pick wrong answers. So that sounds like maybe a little bit conclusory or like, oh, well, yeah, sure, if I just have a magic wand. But
Raise revenue and decrease costs. There you go. That's your plan.
right, right. Next stop, profit. Right. No, but I mean this, I'm being genuine here. If you got to remember that there's two ways to avoid missing a question.
Hmm.
One way is to positively identify the correct answer and choose it. That's what everybody wants to do. And yeah, ideally, you predict the answer, you go into the answer choices, you find exactly what you're looking for. That's great. That's awesome when that happens. But the other way, it's like your backup parachute. You have to have high standards and just refuse to pick wrong answers. So just don't choose something unless you're willing to vouch for it. And if you have those high standards, then you can frequently just eliminate four wrong answers and come back to the one answer that you can't eliminate. And once you really understand it, you'll realize, oh, this is in line with what I predicted, or oh, it's not in line with what I predicted, but that's okay because now that I understand it, I see how that's a perfectly valid answer to this question. Should we do a logical reasoning question?
Yeah, we should. I do want to say one more thing, and that is, and this is exactly along the lines you're saying, and that is that it is easier oftentimes to eliminate wrong answers because it only takes one word from the answer to make it
Right.
wrong.
Right. You don't even have to read all the way through answers to know that they're wrong
Yeah.
because we go in with a default presumption that every answer is wrong 80% of the time. So we're not reading answers hoping that they're right. We're reading answers looking for, okay, how can I eliminate this answer?
Yep.
And you just stop reading it as soon as you can eliminate it. All right. I'm going to read you this question. I'll give you opportunities to respond as we go.
Okay. Great.
This is test 123, by the way, section 3, question 23. Political candidates' speeches are loaded with promises and with expressions of good intention,
Okay. I'm
but
just gonna
one
interrupt.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just interrupting you there because there's a comma. So, okay. I'm not surprised that political candidates, politicians, are going out and saying things and promising a lot of things and expressing good intentions, intentions to help people or to end wars or whatever. Yeah, that's not surprising. Okay.
After the comma, it continues, but one must not forget that the politicians' purpose in giving these speeches is to get themselves elected.
Yeah. totally. So they could be lying. They just need to say whatever they need to say to get elected. Hopefully that's true, but of course it doesn't have to be. Yeah, I understand.
Clearly, then,
I'm anticipating the conclusion
uh huh,
based on this evidence so far, and I'm expecting it to be bad, but we will see.
right. Wait, but why are you expecting a bad conclusion?
Just I don't know, 90% of the arguments, 95% of the arguments on the LSAT are bad. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time in LSAT logical reasoning, if they're making an argument, if they're doing logic,
Yep.
if they're giving you any of those keyword or any of those little clues that they're about to make a conclusion, which here this is a way of introducing a conclusion, isn't it? The
Hmm.
word
Hmm.
then.
Yeah, the word then, but not the word clearly. A lot of
No.
people think, oh, clearly, oh, that's a conclusion indicator. No, it could indicate a fact as well.
Yeah, I think more often they use it as part of their conclusion.
Hmm.
So it could be like a suggestion that, hey, this might be the conclusion, but the then is conclusive, right?
Yep.
Clearly, then. Okay, so here
Hmm.
comes the conclusion of the argument. And this is the part that we're always going to push back on. Like, I'll grant you your premises, but I'm not going to grant you the thing that comes next unless it's
Hmm.
proven by those facts. So they go on and they say, clearly, then, these speeches are selfishly motivated and the promises made in them are unreliable.
Totally possible. It's totally possible that the speeches are selfish and that the promises are unreliable. They may not actually happen, but that doesn't have to be true. You could have speeches that are motivated by a sincere desire to help, and you could have promises that actually get fulfilled for who knows what reason, political or non political reasons. So, yeah, I think this is totally plausible, but it's just not proven. And unfortunately, that's the standard. On the LSAT, anytime you say therefore, whatever you say after it, and I don't mean or any term or any time you introduce a conclusion, what you say has to be proven. And if
Yeah.
it's not, then it's questionable.
Notice that Ben is not saying, no, you're wrong. These are not selfishly motivated and they are reliable. He's not doing like, you know, modern debate. Like if you turn on the cable news,
Yeah.
you're gonna get just like the red team saying one thing and the blue team saying the exact opposite of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't that. Ben is acknowledging, oh, well, it's possible that these are selfishly motivated. Like, yeah, you said that their purpose in giving the speeches is to get themselves elected. So I can see how that, does indicate that there is at least a selfish motivation that is playing a part here.
Hmm.
And I get it that, there's reason to suspect that the promises might not be unreliable. And I'll even grant you the possibility that that's all true.
Hmm.
But that's not my job. My job is to disagree or to point out possible ways that this could be wrong.
Yep.
So, again, what's your objection, Ben? If you're going to say, well, it's possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have two objections because I'm gonna focus in on these two elements of this conclusion. It's
Yep.
really asserting two things. One, these
Yep.
speeches are selfishly motivated. I understand that the purpose in giving these speeches is to get themselves elected, but maybe they're getting themselves elected because they want to help others.
Yeah.
So, how selfish is it really in the end? For the promises made, same thing. They could make promises to get elected because they actually wanna do them.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
these
And they
things can
might,
both be true at the same time. That's the real problem. Yeah.
yeah. And what if, I mean, it's possible that you could just run for office and never say anything but the truth. You are going to probably emphasize the things that you think are going to really play with your audience. And
Mhm.
there might be other things that you want to do that you're never going to talk about in your speeches
Mhm.
because you don't think that they will play with your audience. But if you go out there and just keep hammering on the points that you think, like, I really want to do this thing and I really think you're going to like it. So I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do for you.
Mhm.
Your speech could be selfishly motivated, but it could also be motivated by a desire to help.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be an unreliable promise because you might really mean what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Not that we think that that's actually true of our politicians. We're just saying that it's possible.
Totally possible.
And
Yep.
our job, like, because this question says selfishly motivated, therefore unreliable, our job is really to push back on that and say, well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
All right. Now the question says, which one of the following most accurately describes a flaw in the argument above?
Okay. So I'm not surprised that they're asking me to describe a flaw because the argument didn't prove its conclusion. Now I'm just going to expect something to describe exactly what happened in the argument, and that thing is a problem.
Great. A, the argument presumes, without providing justification, that if a person's promise is not selfishly motivated,
What?
then that promise is reliable.
Okay. So this is oddly trying to take the two ideas in the conclusion and then connect them.
Hmm,
And we don't need to do that in this
hmm.
argument. They can be two isolated points that you're just trying to make separately.
Yeah. Did did this argument do what A is describing?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder how much time in real life you actually would have even given that answer. I noticed that your response
I
halfway
winced.
through, well, it
Yeah.
was like, "What?" You were kind of like, "Huh?"
Yeah. Yeah. I got queasy, if that's the right word, at not selfishly motivated because we're talking about,
Something that is selfishly motivated and
yeah.
is therefore unreliable.
Well, not even that, right? Because it said they're selfishly motivated and not and therefore unreliable, just and separately they are unreliable. But it's based on the premises. The premises were that the purpose in giving these speeches is to get themselves elected. In other words, um, they didn't talk about the motivation in the premises. So we can't go from their motivation to any sort of conclusion. Yet this answer choice is saying, if you happen to know that they're not selfishly motivated, I'm like, well, first, we don't know that. They never talked about
And
motivation.
you're accusing them of being selfishly motivated. You're
Yeah.
not
It's
accusing
just,
them of being not selfishly motivated. I guess
yeah.
the thing I wanted to say about A,
Yeah.
and I just want to like give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain for the life of an LSAT teacher.
Yeah.
In real life, I would not take any of this time to just say, I don't think A is it. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even need to understand it. I'd be halfway through it and I'd be like, wait a second, presumes that a person who is not selfishly motivated is some other I thought we were accusing people who are selfishly motivated of therefore making unreliable promises. And maybe you assumed that just because they're trying to get themselves elected, they are therefore selfishly motivated. But there's so many words in A, and it's describing something that seems to be just the opposite or different from what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And so I get halfway through that answer and I go, look, I know that 80% of the time A is wrong. That's a fact. So if I'm halfway through A and I'm like, wow, there are a lot of words here and I don't really understand what it's saying, I think I just presumptively pass on A. I might come back to it if I also pass on B, C, D, and E. But 80% of the time, B, C, D, or E is going to turn out to be correct. So if I'm halfway through A and I'm like, oh boy, this is confusing, this is awkward, I don't think that's it. I think in real life, I just pass and move to the next answer. Now, as an LSAT teacher, students a lot of times push back, no, but I want to know conclusively why that answer is wrong. And we can do that. We can take the time to explain to you exactly why technically that answer is wrong. But we also want to train you to just expect answers to be wrong. And when they're talking about confusing, convoluted shit, especially with a ton of words in it, on a first read through, you just need to have a pretty quick trigger there and just be like, nah, I don't think so. Next.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one thing to be clear here is it says if a person's promise is not selfishly motivated, and the conclusion said these speeches are selfishly
Right.
motivated. So it's possible that this if then statement gets flipped around and it ends up going in the right direction for this conclusion, which is part of the reason I let you keep reading. But as soon as it's trying to equate these two things that can be and are separate in the conclusion, I'm just like, no, that's a
I just
classic LSAT
I feel
mistake.
like A is going to have to be confusing sufficient for necessary even to be a credible choice.
Um, no, I don't think so because it says if not selfishly motivated, then something happens. So if that thing didn't happen, then you could say, oh, then they're selfishly motivated. Like if something's not selfishly motivated, then X happens. Okay. So then if X doesn't happen, then it is selfishly motivated.
So it could have said that if it's not selfishly motivated, then the purpose would not be to get themselves elected,
Yes, something
but
like
the
that.
purpose was to get themselves elected. So you're presuming then that it was selfishly motivated? Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I guess I can
Yeah.
see that. I guess the thing I really want to point out though is that again, 80% of the time that answer is going to be wrong. So
Yeah,
when we're
totally.
reading it and we don't like if it's not really speaking to us, we just go, yeah, I don't think so. Next.
Yep.
Okay, B. The argument presumes without providing justification that promises made for selfish reasons are never kept.
No, it's too broad. Well, first of all, it's assuming that if your purpose in giving these speeches is to get elected, you're doing it for selfish reasons. So it's assuming what the conclusion is even saying. And even then, it's like this answer choice is not narrowly tailored to just this circumstance. It's talking about all promises made for selfish reasons. And you're like, hey, they could be kept in other circumstances. I have no clue.
Right. They only concluded unreliable. They
Hmm.
didn't conclude the things they're promising will never happen.
Yep.
So B is it's too strong of an allegation. They just didn't do what that's describing. C, the argument confuses the effect of an action with its cause.
Didn't see any cause and effect claims here.
Yeah, and we know what that flaw looks like. C is describing like probably the second most common LSAT flaw. The first most common is confusing sufficient for necessary. Cause and effect errors, including the reversal of cause and effect, I think is one of I've always said that I think it's probably the second most popular flaw that appears on the test.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would think that the confusing correlation with causation, right,
Yeah.
is definitely one of the most common flaws. Confusing cause and effect,
Well,
it's up there.
it's a
It's like a
specific
variant of that, sure.
it's a subtype of when I see correlation therefore causation, one of the first things I think about is well, how do you know that causal relationship isn't backward? So
Hmm.
they make a
Sure,
lot of
sure.
arguments that sound like an example to make C correct. If I had said cigarette smoking is highly correlated with cancer, therefore cancer causes people to smoke,
Hmm.
that would be exactly what C is describing. You are
Hmm.
confusing potentially the effect of an action with its cause. So smoking causes cancer. You tried to conclude cancer causes smoking. It's just such a common flaw. It does pop up a lot. And I think my cancer and smoking example is a very clear example of what C is describing. And if you just know what that feels like, then you read an answer like C and you're like, well, wait a second. I didn't see any kind of reversal of cause and effect here.
Mm.
D, the argument overlooks the fact that a promise need not be unreliable just because the person who made it had an ulterior motive for doing so.
Okay. Does the argument overlook this fact? Yeah, that a promise doesn't necessarily, they said need not. That's a great phrase, by the way, but it's one that throws people off. If a promise need not be unreliable, that means the promise doesn't necessarily need to be unreliable. It could be reliable. So it doesn't have to be unreliable just because the person who made it had an ulterior motive. In other words, uh, a desire to get elected.
Wait, but Ben,
Doesn't
it never said the words ulterior motive.
I mean,
I didn't pick D
it's
because it said ulterior motive.
yeah, well,
Where does it say there ulterior motive?
If your purpose in giving these speeches is to get yourself elected, then that could be a different or ulterior motive to what you're claiming when you claim to do something for the people.
I've never looked up the word ulterior before.
Is it hidden?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Ulterior, existing beyond what is obvious or admitted, or intentionally hidden. Could there be an ulterior motive behind his request? So I see that they're asking for X, but are
Hmm.
they really trying to get Y?
Yeah. Are they
That's an
making
ulterior.
promises to you to get elected? Right.
Yeah. Other synonyms for ulterior are secondary, underlying, undisclosed, undivulged, unexpressed, concealed. Yeah, hidden. Okay. So, sorry, I'm going to read D again. The argument overlooks the fact that a promise need not be unreliable just because the person who made it had an ulterior motive for doing so. Did the argument do that?
It did. It overlooked this possibility that
Is
people
that
have.
possibility a problem?
Yeah, that's a problem because that's the argument is assuming the opposite of this to get to its conclusion.
And in very plain spoken terms, your response to D, like using the actual facts here, you would say, well, just because I'm trying to get myself elected doesn't mean that I have to be lying.
Hmm.
Like I could be making a legit promise. My promise could be reliable, even though I am making this speech with the ulterior motive of trying to get elected.
Yep.
So we like D. The argument
Hmm.
does what D is describing, and it's a problem that they did it. I want to point out here that when we read Anonymous's question, right? Anonymous said, uh, the wording of the answer choices can be odd and intentionally confusing.
Yeah.
Before we even got to this question, my prediction was, well, yeah, they do intentionally shitify the answer choices frequently by adding a double negative.
Hmm.
That's exactly what D does.
Yeah.
It added a double negative. It says, need not be unreliable.
Yeah.
In other words, the promise could be reliable.
Hmm.
So, did this argument overlook the fact that a promise can be reliable, even if a person is saying something with an ulterior motive?
Yeah.
They totally did. Ulterior motive is an additional phrase that they threw in there. Whoa, ulterior. I didn't pick D because it said ulterior.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know, but synonyms are a thing. And like you're supposed to be a gladiator of the English language if you're going to become a successful lawyer. So you have to fight through it, right? And see how it's perfectly justifiable.
Yeah.
All you got to do now is get rid of E, and you can confidently pick D and move on. E says the argument overlooks the fact that a candidate who makes promises for selfish reasons may nonetheless be worthy of the office for which he or she is running.
Okay. I mean, a couple of problems. One, the conclusion was that the candidate is selfish, right? And so when it says it overlooks the fact that a candidate who makes promises for selfish reasons, I don't know that these candidates are selfish based on the premises. So I I could stop right there, honestly.
Let's get
You
to your
keep
second
going.
objection, though, because I like your second objection better.
The second one is may nonetheless be worthy of the office. Never an issue raised in this argument at all.
Yeah, it's just not what they're trying to conclude. So E, it's like, all right, fine. Maybe you overlooked a possibility. I'm not sure you overlooked a fact. Whatever. I mean, D and E aren't different on the first few words, right?
Hmm.
The argument overlooks the fact that, but E is talking about, well, you might be selfishly motivated, but still be worthy of office. Worthy of office. We weren't talking about whether these people were worthy of office. It's beside the point. So even if you did overlook that fact, it's not a problem that you did because your conclusion isn't about that. You did overlook this fact that it's possible that you can have an ulterior motive and still make reliable promises. You overlook that fact, and that's a big problem for you because you're concluding that their promises are unreliable. Fairly straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Eliminating A, B, C, and E after deciphering D, get rid of the double negative, realize how, yep, they did this, and it's a problem that they did it. Answer is D, and you're moving on. Next one on the agenda is from Anonymous. The subject is how to move forward when stuck.
Hi, Demon Team. I appreciate your advice on previous podcasts in which you tell us not to move forward in reading a third answer choice if we're already stuck between two. Okay, great. So you've kept answer choice A, you've kept answer choice B. Don't go on to answer choice C until you resolve which one is better between the two, right? Otherwise, you're just piling on to problems. All right. So Anonymous continues, because you don't want to add a third option into rotation to keep in your mind, and that we should at least eliminate one of them. Okay. I agree 100%.
100%. I mean, you can't. Like, it's really pretty rare that you should be narrowing it down to two. But when you do narrow it down to two, there can be only one. So you have to, at that point,
choose between them.
Choose. Yeah. There's one of those answers is conclusively wrong. One of those answers is demonstrably wrong. And the LSAT's not about weighing and balancing and picking like, well, I mean, this one could be right, but that one is more right. It's just not about that. It's about eliminating things that are wrong. So that's why we say if you like both A and B, you can't read C until you have gotten rid of one of A or B. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So Anonymous continues, however, in practice, this is much easier said than done. I, too, do not wish to keep so many answer choices open, but what do you suggest we do if we're truly stuck and simply draw a blank?
Wait a second. There's no blank. What are you talking about? There's a record. Did you understand the record? There's a question. Did you understand the question that's being asked? Now you're trying to tell me that A does answer the question, but you're also trying to tell me that B does answer the question. That can't both be true. One of them doesn't answer the question. One of those answers is wrong. And it has nothing to do with your, like, I see that the question is going to go on and talk about making predictions and stuff, but what? Totally devoid of the idea that we're going to frequently be predicting these answers. You read the record. You read the question that they're asking you based on that record. You can't read A and go, yeah, maybe, and read B and go, yeah, maybe. Okay, let me read C. Because you're just not doing it right at that point. You're just not understanding what you've read so far.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you say you're stuck and you're wondering what to do. Well, what you need to do is go back and reread the passage.
Right.
Or reread the question, or probably both.
Yeah.
All that's happened here is that you've discovered that you don't understand what you've read so far sooner rather than later. Like a lot of people keep going and they have 3, 4 answers kept open and they get to E and they're like, shit, I can't find the answer. And then they realize, then they come to that moment and they're like, okay, I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
You're just catching that sooner.
And it could be something as simple as you didn't catch that this was an accept question.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you like A and you like B as well, and you can't, no, this one weakens and that one weakens as well. Okay, well, is it a weaken question or is it a weaken accept question? Because if it's a weaken accept, then A might weaken and B might weaken, and neither of them are correct because they both weaken and you're looking for an accept. But this test is always a reading comprehension test first. And I think that's what people don't really grasp. And it's so core to what we do. We just over and over insist that you read carefully and actually understand what's there. Because you just simply can't be thinking A's good, thinking B's good, and going on to C. What? You're like, it's 100%. You are not understanding something. And if you don't understand, you have to reread. You can't just read more.
Yeah. I do want to read this last bit so we can talk more about this. The Anonymous says, for some questions, I truly can't make a prediction and can only move forward and maybe get some ideas sparked in my mind through reviewing all the answer choices and at least definitively eliminating one or two.
Oh,
So
God.
I wanted to talk about this ideas sparked in my mind through reviewing all the answer choices. The answer choices are not meant to help you, they are intentionally meant to dissuade you from the correct answer.
Yep.
So
No, the
getting
ideas that
ideas
are
from the
being
bad
sparked,
answers is not a good idea.
right. Those ideas being sparked in your mind through reviewing all the answer choices, you need to remember that 4 out of 5 answers are wrong.
Yeah.
So if those answers are sparking ideas in your mind, they are sparking wrong ideas in your mind.
Yep.
They're distracting you, they're confusing you, they're making you think that there's things in the passage that aren't actually there.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go back, you got to slow way down, you got to reread, you got to really understand what you're doing. What's the value, Ben, of eliminating 1 or 2 answers?
0.
It's not 0, but it's
It's
very
almost
small.
0.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
it's vanishingly small. Like,
yeah.
well, look,
The reason I want to say that it's 0 is that when you, right, in theory, each answer choice is a 20% chance of being correct or an 80% chance of being wrong. But the reality is that at least 2 of these answers are so easily eliminated that they don't really compete with the other
well,
answers.
let's do the math.
Okay.
What is the value, just in pure math terms? Okay,
Sure.
let's say all 5 answers have an equal chance of being correct.
Okay.
If I eliminate 1 answer, how much have I improved my expected value on this question? What's my expected value if I just guess randomly?
It's 20%, right?
Okay.
So
If I
now it's
eliminate
25. So you've increased it by 5%? Or
5%,
yeah.
yep, you've gone from a question that you will get right 1 out of 5 times now to a question that you're going to get right 1 out of 4 times.
Yeah.
So from 20% chance to 25% chance. And if you can eliminate a second answer, you now have a 33% chance of getting it right. So eliminating 1 or 2 answers, eliminating even 2 answers, improves your expectation on that question by 13%. Wait, 13%? Yeah, 13%. You go from 20% to 33%.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. Like, even a 50-50 is not good. Eliminating 3 wrong answers takes you from a 20% chance of getting it right to a 50-50.
Yeah. Yes. And
That's not
that's
the
not
goal.
good. Yeah.
No, that's not the goal.
Yeah.
Like, your understanding score is really low if you're narrowing everything down to a 50-50. You're just not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to turn zeros into ones.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking to turn it into a 1/3 shot or turn it into a 50-50. That's
Yeah.
not what we're looking to do. We're looking to conclusively answer this question. So even if you can definitively eliminate 1 or 2 answers, that's what's the stupid show? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Mm.
That's like that, that's like one of the things that you have. You've got phone a friend,
Yeah. Ask the audience, something like
ask
that.
the audience, and then there's one that's like just eliminates answer choices.
Yep.
But eliminating the worst answer choices doesn't actually help you answer the question at all.
Yeah. Which is what I was trying to say earlier, right? Like
Yes.
eliminating one or, yeah, you went through this math exercise, which I think is interesting, but it started with the assumption that each question has a 20% chance of being correct, or
Each answer has a 20% chance.
Yeah, each answer has a 20% chance of being correct. Yes, if you don't look at them, that's true. But when you start looking at them, it becomes very obvious for the vast majority
Right.
of test takers which 1 or 2 are clearly out.
Right.
And so you haven't changed the needle. You haven't moved the needle at all relative to other test
Right.
takers, which is what really matters.
Yeah. And if I read A and B and I like both of them,
Yeah.
even if I do then read C, no way in hell, read D, no way in hell, read E, no way in hell, that's not actually helping me, because if I
You're
like
still
A
stuck between A and
and
B.
I like B,
Yeah.
one of those is almost guaranteed to be the right answer.
Mhm.
So why not do the work now of conclusively eliminating one of those 2 answers before crowding your head with more bullshit,
Mhm.
right? Like C isn't going to help you eliminate A or B.
Mhm.
D is not going to help you eliminate A or B. So you got to just do the work now instead of kind of like, oh, I'm too lazy to do it now. I'm just going to keep going and hope that
Or worse, I'm
somehow
gonna
these
get ideas. Yeah.
these wrong answers are going to going to teach me what there is to be learned about this question. No, that's just not how it's done. Thank you, Anonymous, for writing in.
Yeah. All right. So we have a new segment in the show, hopefully.
Okay.
What's the deal with X law school? And
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll grab a law school and we'll walk you through the 509 so you can start to understand how to read those 509s and what it means for that law in particular. Here we have an email from Hannah. The subject is University of Washington no longer requiring the LSAT for some.
So, what's the deal
Yeah.
with University of Washington Law School? I don't know much about University of Washington Law School. Do you?
No, I don't know anything about it. Actually, I don't even know what it's ranked. I don't know. Not that that matters, but
University of Washington, by the way, is in Seattle. It's in a very beautiful part of Seattle. The campus
okay.
has amazing mountain views. It's really quite spectacular. It's urban, if you like urban.
Hmm.
Um, William H. Gates Hall is their address.
Okay.
I've heard of them. Okay, so just for some background information,
Yeah.
50th percentile LSAT is 164. 50th percentile GPA is 3.74. Those are good numbers for most undergrads, but most undergrads don't go to law school. So 164 and 3.74 is pretty middling, I guess, right? Those are scores that indicate, okay, you're an okay student, but not an elite student. You're an okay LSAT student, but not an elite LSAT student by any means. What's their ranking?
48.
48 in the country. So they're really no different from a school that's ranked 30th or a school that's ranked 60th. I think this should be considered a regional law school. You would only consider going to this school if you really wanted to practice in the Pacific Northwest. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. What's the question? What's the deal with the University of Okay. Hello, says Hannah. I recently found out that UW is no longer requiring the LSAT for students who attended UW undergrad and apply their senior year. Oh boy. We know what this is, right?
Yeah, this is very common.
What is it?
They don't want you to go and take the LSAT and learn how valuable you are and go to a better ranked law school. They don't want to lose you. They want to trap you in their university and keep getting tuition dollars from you.
This is a scam in the guise of a benefit.
Oh, you
This
don't have to
is
take the LSAT.
this is the wolf in sheep's clothing. 100%. Okay.
Yep.
This happens at a lot of schools where the law school, you know, tries, which is like a profit center for the university. The law school is trying to poach their own undergrads to the detriment, by the way, of their own undergrads. Because this is clearly bad for you to not take the LSAT. If you take the LSAT, depending on, we don't know Hannah's GPA, we don't know what Hannah's got in the tank is in terms of LSAT. But if Hannah's like a 3.9, and if Hannah could get like a 168, which is not even that fabulous of an LSAT score, she'd be above the 75th percentile on both LSAT and GPA at
Yeah.
this school, which
Yeah.
means that this school would never be a good choice for Hannah unless they were going to give her a full ride. Uh, this school does not give a lot of full rides. I'm on their 509 report now, American Bar
Yeah.
Association standard 509 information report. By the way, if you want to do research on law schools, great place to start is our scholarship estimator. That's lsatdemon.com/scholarships. Scrolling down to the bottom of the second page. No, sorry, top of the third page. Bottom of the second page, we see tuition and fees. This school, even though it's a, mediocre regional law school, they charge resident tuition of $42,000. They charge non-resident tuition of $55,000. they charge, like Harvard prices, even though they're not giving you Harvard reputation on your diploma,
Yeah.
which almost all law schools do. Um, 79% of their school gets some kind of a grant, but the vast majority of those are less than half tuition. So this isn't a school that is particularly playing the full ride scholarship game, but they would have to if you got a high LSAT and if you had a high GPA. You just would never go to this school. You would go to some other more prestigious school, or you would take a scholarship, including full ride scholarships, to other schools. Even with their median LSAT and GPA, right? If you had a
Mm-hmm.
3.74 and a 164, you could get lots of scholarships to schools in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
So why would you go to University of Washington? Well, either you think that they're so much more prestigious than these other schools that you're going to go to, which is, it's hard to make that case when they're 48th in the country or whatever it is. Or they find some other way to get you, and that's what this seems like to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll read the rest of it. Again, it's University of Washington is no longer requiring the LSAT for students who attended UW undergrad and apply during their senior year. So it's like, they're just like, okay, so we're going to keep you right on the train. We're just going to shoo you right into our law school where you can continue to borrow 50, 60, 70, $80,000 a year. And the bulk of that just comes straight to us. And
Yeah.
we get to stamp a JD for you 3 years from now and send you on your way with $500,000 in debt.
Wow.
Anyway,
I want to add one thing. You
yeah.
went through the numbers on the 509 report. You can also, if you go to the estimator, that's lsatdemon.com/estimator, and search for Washington, or just scroll down to 48, and you click on Washington, you'll get to our tuition roll call, which is a visual representation of the 509 report. And you can see the class laid out, and 21% of the class getting no discount, and then 69% of the class getting less than half. And it's this funny situation where, yeah, 7% of the class is getting more than half tuition scholarships. And then no one's apparently getting a full tuition scholarship, but 3% might be getting a stipend. So somehow they're
So full
getting more
tuition
than,
plus, yeah.
yeah.
So they have some scholarship programs where they're really gonna, like, yeah, they do need to keep their LSAT and GPA profiles up to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. They need
Mm-hmm.
they need to have some rock stars at this school. So they give a few scholarships to attract a few really, really talented students. Mostly they give scammerships, which are just like these slight
Token
discounts.
discounts. Yeah.
Right.
That's what it's funny because although they're not playing this game of giving out a whole bunch of full tuition scholarships, which can be shocking to people, these 69% of students who are getting less than half, boy, I'm scared to know what they got, right? Did they get a $5,000 scholarship and they just couldn't stop telling their family about how they got the presidential scholarship to Washington University, which is really nothing,
It's a
but
five
it
thousand
feels
dollar or
like a
well,
lot?
what are the okay, so their oh yeah, okay. So their median grant amount of the 79% of people who get a grant, the
Mm-hmm.
median grant amount is $13,000.
Mm-hmm.
Again, off of a $55,000 non-resident tuition or a 42 plus fees, $43,000 or $43,500 resident tuition.
Mm-hmm.
They're only giving you again a $13,000 discount.
Yeah.
So they're still trying to charge you $30,000 a year to go to this school,
Yeah.
just tuition. Like, and if you go as a senior in undergrad straight in without even taking the LSAT, you're now not eligible for scholarship offers pretty much at any other school.
Mm-hmm.
Why would Washington give you anything other than just this scammership
Yeah.
to try to close the deal? You know,
Mm-hmm.
far more people reject University of Washington than University of Washington rejects.
Mm.
So this is at the top of the 509 report under
Yeah.
first year class. Okay. From last year's first year class,
Yep.
they accepted almost 35% of their applicants. So that sounds, oh, wow, almost 2 out of 3 people get rejected when they apply.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. But of the people they admit, only slightly less than 22% of the people they admit actually end up going there.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's prestigious because they're only, only admitting 35%. But the truth is, they have a hard time filling their seats because they admit 4 or 5 times as many people as actually end up coming to their school. Should we continue with
Yeah.
I think that's what this segment is going to turn into, is just kind of taking the wind out of the sails of these law schools that try to act like they're the shit.
Hmm.
And what you realize is, nah, it's just another, for-profit nonprofit that is just trying to fill their classes and trying to charge a whole bunch of tuition so that they can rake money off of these applicants.
I'd really love to know how Hannah was told about this, right? She says, I recently found out that UW is no longer requiring the LSAT. It was probably presented in the most glowing terms imaginable, right?
100%. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to read the
Oh,
rest of Hannah's
yeah.
email because Hannah does sound like she's pretty savvy. Hannah
Hmm.
continues and says, you have to apply early. I believe that it's binding. No idea about scholarships because scholarships are a separate application at UW. And you are not allowed to take a gap year before applying or defer once you've been admitted under these conditions. University of Washington Law's Associate Director of Admissions said it was to help with equity by helping those who can't do LSAT prep, are nervous about the LSAT, or have underperformed. And there is an option uh, similar to Wash U, which is in St. Louis. Similar to Wash U, you can omit the LSAT if you've already taken it.
Hmm.
Okay, Hannah wraps up and says, this came off as predatory because it targets inexperienced, anxious, and underprepared students as young as 20 years old. Do you agree? Do you think other law schools will follow this model in the future? Thanks.
Yes. And not that they will follow it in the future, they already follow it now. This is
Very
not
common.
unique to the University of Washington. Yeah.
Nope. Very common that law schools will behave predatorily to their own undergrads.
Yep.
Am I allowed to say predatorily?
You're
I mean,
asking
I
about the
could say
LY or
behave
the
in a predatory manner
yeah,
or something.
predatorily. It sounds like it could be a word. Yeah.
I think you can
Yeah.
make it into an adverb, right?
Hmm.
Um, they are allowed to, I mean, and it is very common that they will be predatory toward their own undergrads.
Hmm.
Now, if I was in charge of like pre-law, if I was the undergrad advisor,
Yeah.
I would be like, do not accept this offer. Definitely do take the LSAT. Definitely apply broadly, see what kinds of offers you get, because I would want to give advice that was in line with the best interests of my students. This,
Yeah. Good luck, right? Because you might not have your job anymore.
yeah, I might get fired, but I mean, like if I'm giving advice to undergrads and trying,
Yep.
they're there to get advice from me about what's in their best interest, this offer is not in their best interest.
No.
It allows you to be lazy and not take the LSAT. Oh, you're anxious about the LSAT. Oh, okay. But you should still just go ahead and indebt yourself a further $100,000 or more by going to our mediocre law school. That's not good. It's not,
Not good.
this program, and it is again the wolf in sheep's clothing because, this associate director of admissions, by the way, what does that mean if you're the associate director of admissions?
You're just in the admissions office? I don't
Yeah. And what is your primary role?
oh yeah, you're chief sales operator.
Yeah. This is a sales person. You
Yeah.
have to understand that, like, they make it look like it's all prestigious and exclusive and whatever, right?
Mm.
But they have a hard time closing these deals. Four, one, sorry, 3 out of every 4 people that they admit look at the deal and go, nah, that's not a good deal.
Nope. Yeah.
So they just want more grist for the mill. They're just trying to get more applications in. That's all they want. That their whole goal is to get more people to apply so that they can hopefully charge more people tuition.
Yep.
And them doing this in the name of equity is the particularly nefarious part of this, I think, right?
Well, it could be
Oh,
entirely true.
so they
They
could believe it.
they could 100% believe it, but what they're I I I don't want to say choosing to ignore, but it's very possible that they're choosing to ignore the fact that then they're inviting minority applicants to basically take on a bunch of debt.
Yeah,
Like
and
I
well,
don't
we
see
know,
how that
but
serves equity. That just
and
seems like
and we
wildly,
know that that's a fact.
yeah.
We know that minority applicants get charged more for law school overall,
Hmm.
and they get less out of law school overall.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a fact in the law school
They pay more
system.
and they're less likely to pass the bar. So it's like,
Yep,
okay, how is
they
this
pay more for
helping?
less.
Yep.
And when you do it in the name of equity and inclusion and all that, it like sounds really good, but what are you really doing here? You're soaking people for a hell of a lot of debt. And at a school like University of Washington, ranked 50th in the country, what percentage of these applicants or what percentage of these graduates do you think end up having like really successful legal careers?
Hmm.
We don't know,
Yeah, we
but it's no gravy train. It's definitely not guaranteed.
yeah.
This associate director of admissions probably believes, right? They drank the Kool Aid. So
Yeah.
they think that they're doing something good for the world by doing this program.
Yeah.
We're here to tell you that you can go to a better school and you can go for a better price. And this type of program where they're going to lock you in without letting you see what the rest of the market has to offer you is just bad for the undergrads at the school.
Or yeah, and I mean, I know we say this all the time, or don't go at all. I mean, we also don't want to get trapped into the the false decision making construct of like, oh, can I go to the University of Washington or can I go somewhere else with a better LSAT score? Yeah, or you could go to no law school.
Perfectly valid option as well. Yeah.
I
And
think
this
people
is
just
like,
need to consider that more. So many people
right.
just like default to law school wildly.
Oh, and that's what they're looking for here too, right? They're like,
Mm.
oh, you're not sure and you don't, you're a little nervous about the LSAT. Well, we have this program. Since you're a UW undergrad,
Just keep going. Higher
you could just keep
education.
going straight through into our. I mean, this just can't be good. It also can't be good, I don't think, Ben, for the quality of their JD grads because they're going to be getting people into the school who are not really committed to the idea. Like, they're just not even sure that they want to be lawyers.
Yeah.
How's this benefit anybody? Anyway,
Yeah.
what's the deal with University of Washington Law School?
It's
They're
like
just
all other
like
law schools.
all other law schools. Yeah. It's not surprising. So we dunked on them this time, but there will be others. Next email on the agenda is from Josh.
Hi, Ben and Nathan. I hope you're doing well. As a Canadian applicant, I've noticed that many law schools, especially in Ontario, no longer list LSAT or GPA medians and instead emphasize a more holistic approach to admissions. I'm curious about your thoughts on this shift. How holistic do you think the process truly is in practice? While I'm focusing on achieving the highest LSAT score possible, I find it challenging to determine when to stop, especially since in Canada, LSAT points don't directly translate into scholarship opportunities the way they do in the United States. Any advice you have on balancing score goals with the realities of Canadian admissions would be greatly appreciated.
It's true that Canadian law schools don't give the same kinds of scholarships. It's also true that in Canada, there's a lot more funding that comes from the government. So you might end up getting provincial help on paying for your tuition.
Hmm.
I know that Ontario has a pretty robust program for this. The LSAT still is, though, highly determinative of what type of school you get into. And so in Canada, where the schools don't play those scholarship games, I think your focus should much more be on well, where do I want to live? What kind of a school do I want to go to? And the quality of the schools does vary from school to school. And so I think you need to think more about your career goals. The thing you're balancing here is, what do you want to do with your career? And what kind of school do you need to go to in order to get those outcomes for your career?
Are these numbers not available? Like, I think Josh is like, well, what score should I get if I want to go to a school in Ontario? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, when you say they no longer list their medians, we don't have the American Bar Association oversight on these schools.
yeah.
So I don't know what the deal is for Canadian applicants specifically. I don't know if there's another source of this data. If the school themselves isn't talking about it, that doesn't mean it's not important to them.
Hmm.
They are asking for your LSAT on your application, right? It's probably going to matter. Where to stop? I don't know. It depends on what kinds of schools you're applying to. Are you applying in the US at all, Josh? If you're applying in the US at all, then you really do need to pay attention to how LSAT is going to affect the price that you'll pay to go to law school. In Canada, I'm not really sure what to offer you. My guess would be though that the most competitive law schools are going to require very competitive LSAT. They can say how they're holistic as much as they want, but it's easier for them to make decisions based on numerical metrics like LSAT and GPA. Next one.
Yeah. The next one's from N. The subject is picking a school to base my LSAT goal off of.
Hello, Ben and Nate. I finished my undergrad this spring with a 3.98 GPA in 2 years. I've since got a full time job and never planned on going to law school. Wait, what? Finished undergrad in just two
I
years with
know.
a
I was,
3.98?
oh, maybe they did community college, or maybe they just really banged it out in 2 years. Some people do that. It's
And
like a
did a
thing.
shit ton of AP classes.
Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, I was kind of blew my mind that my niece did an AP class her freshman year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, like, she was accumulating college credits from the very beginning of high school.
Hmm.
I can see how if you did a lot of AP
Yeah.
and you really cranked it out once you got to school, that's impressive for
Yeah.
N.
Yeah.
A professor put the thought into my mind a while ago, and now I'm fully committed to it, but I'm only going if I get full tuition. Law school, that is.
Yeah. I'm just pausing here because it sounds like somebody put the idea in your head and then you just kept thinking about it. I hope that you've supplemented that idea with other research.
Well, N is presumably 19 years old, 20 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, kids do make dramatic decisions based on very limited
Information.
information,
Yeah.
right? Um, I'm trying to set a goal LSAT score, but I'm not sure which school to target. My cold diagnostic, having never looked at an LSAT question before, was 156.
Damn.
I want to stay close to where I live, and it seems like the schools in range that are decent are Wash U, Vanderbilt, IU, and Ohio State. Do you have any advice for targeting schools for the purpose of LSAT goals? I think your LSAT goal should be as high as you can possibly get, and then determine what schools you're actually going to apply to.
Hmm.
You're an excellent candidate with a 156 diagnostic. I mean, where do you think N could end up?
Easily in the mid 170s, if not higher.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would expect you to end up with something in the 170s
Yeah.
at a cold diagnostic of 156. Yeah, I think we did you a disservice if we don't get you at least a 15-point improvement.
Hmm.
And frequently, I mean, with the 156, the sky's the limit. Like, you're not going to surprise me, Josh, or not Josh. That was the previous one. You're not going to surprise me, N, if you end up with a 180. Literally a
Yeah.
180 would not
Yeah.
surprise me.
Yeah.
So, and with
Not
a
that you demand
3.98,
that of yourself. Like that can, the demand for perfection can prevent you from getting your best score. But
but are you sure you don't want to go to University of Chicago? You're mentioning a lot of Midwest shit. What about Michigan?
You
What
have the
about
GPA.
Chicago? What about Northwestern? And, what about Harvard, Stanford, Yale? Like, I think you want to stay close to where you live, but do you really, if you could go to Stanford or Harvard or Yale, might you change your mind? I hope you would, because it seems like you decided on this kind of recently and you're fully committed, but only if you can go for free. But well, you've got a lot of potential. You could be a really, truly great applicant. The last thing I want you to do is to just settle and go to some local school, like not really put your all into LSAT prep. Like N could end up with a 165 and get a full ride to
Mhm.
Ohio State or something.
Yeah.
That would almost, it'd be kind of sad, right? It'd be like, well, all right. Seems like you could have done a lot more.
You can always move home when you're done with Stanford.
Yeah, and you could get any job in your local area with a Stanford or a Harvard or a Yale or a Chicago or a Michigan JD.
Yeah.
Like those brands are strong enough that they are going to travel to Indiana or wherever you live.
Mhm.
Anyway, I would just apply broadly with the best LSAT I could get if I were you. Next one is another Josh. Subject is playing the admissions game. Little background here. In episode 459, Josh asked whether any lawyer jobs allow for a healthy work life balance. Your response in a nutshell was do your research. Sorry, our response in a nutshell was do your research by asking real lawyers about their jobs. In general, the well paying jobs don't come with work life balance. Here comes the email from Josh.
Josh writes, "Hi Ben slash Nate. Thanks for taking the time to answer my question back in 459. After a long talk with my wife and some research, I know there are some law jobs I'm interested in doing, and at a minimum, I know I will live with regrets if I do not try attending law school." Okay. After taking the September LSAT, I received a 177 score, and I'm proud to say that I'm one and done with the official tests.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think I would advise him to try for a 178, 179 or 180, you're already above or at the 75th percentile at Yale. I think that's true. Let me double check that. But you're above the median at Yale anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't see any reason to try again.
Okay. So Josh continues, as you advise, I'm applying broadly and I'm looking to minimize my debt load. I've been drafting essays for the various schools that I'm applying to and trying not to overthink it by simply doing my best to answer the questions to the letter. However, a
Okay.
friend of mine in law school is saying that I'm actually underthinking it and it should be referencing the law school name wherever possible to create subtle why school X arguments into each answer. I'd been planning not to seek professional help for my essays, but I'm not appreciating the complexity of law school applications. Oh, sorry. But am I not appreciating the complexity of law school applications?
I think your friend who's in law school, I don't, that doesn't make them an expert on law school admissions.
Well, particularly this advice, right? You should be referencing the law school name where whenever possible. That's amateur advice. So that makes me question anything else that this person might be telling you.
Yeah. I mean, what's the purpose of that? Your 177 is going to speak loudly. And if you present yourself as someone who's going to be successful in your desired legal career, I don't think you need to sell them on themselves.
No, and also I just want to reiterate how bad that advice is. When you inject the law school name at the end of your personal statement, law schools know exactly what you're doing. They know that for all other schools, you're replacing that school name with some other school name. So it actually has the opposite of the intended effect. It
Yeah,
doesn't
well,
endear them to you. It makes them go, okay, please.
for sure that. I
Yeah.
was giving the law school student giving this advice a little more credit. It says to create subtle why school X arguments into each answer. So that sounds like I was interpreting that as a bit more sophisticated advice where it was like, well, I know they're asking you about your strengths and weaknesses, but you need to craft that, change it into here's why Stanford University is so good for me particularly.
Yeah, I guess I was focusing on the whenever possible because I feel like you can go overboard and it just
Oh,
comes across as
absolutely.
fake. So,
You also end up causing yourself a lot of work. Like you're going to have to do extra essays for every school. This advice seems like advice that is for someone who's only going to apply to one or two schools.
yeah.
But that goes counter to our biggest advice, which is apply broadly so that the market can tell you what you're worth. And I just don't think you've got the time to craft subtle why school X arguments into each answer.
Well,
Some schools are going to ask you specific questions about that school. And when they're asking you a specific question about their school, then yeah, I guess you have to answer that question. But otherwise, the purpose of the application is for them to learn about you,
and be
not for,
impressed by you. And if they're
yeah,
impressed, then they want you. It's not this, oh, they mentioned us again in this answer. I feel better about them. Yeah.
you just don't have to convince them that their school is a good fit for you. With your 177, they're already convinced. They know you're a rock star. They want you. You don't have
Mhm.
to, I don't know. Yeah, that not the advice we would give.
I mean, I wouldn't take the applications lightly. I guess the final question is, am I not appreciating the complexity of law school applications? You know, I would write good, clear answers to each question and I would put your best foot forward. I wouldn't make the mistake that so many people make of fretting about some weakness and then spilling their guts about it. But I think if you have professional answers, you'll do fine.
Tips from a departing demon. When people unsubscribe from the demon, they frequently give us feedback. We have an email here, or we have some advice from Leah. Little background on Leah. She had our basic subscription for 3 months.
Okay.
She had practice tests between 166 and 175. And here's her advice.
Okay. Keep drilling logical reasoning every spare minute. I drilled logical reasoning while walking the dog, on my lunch break, in line at Starbucks. If you have 5 minutes, try and do two logical reasoning.
Or one,
Yeah, and just start with one. Try to
and
do one.
review.
Yeah, and if you have time, do another.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
Leah's at a very high level here, right?
yeah,
Scoring in the 170s, 2 minutes for two questions for 5 minutes is, but that shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should just be, I'm in line at Starbucks. I want to productively use this time. If
hmm,
you're me, you're sitting there playing iPhone games on your phone
yeah,
or work emails, while I'm
hmm,
waiting in line. But I play a lot of, I've been playing Balatro. You probably haven't heard of this game, but it's a very addictive deck building game on
mm,
iOS. In that time that you're currently wasting it on your iPhone playing around doing whatever you're doing, if you want to get serious about this, if you want to compete with people like Leah,
hmm,
take her advice and spend that time doing your drilling. It's nice with logical reasoning, which by the way is 2/3 of the test now.
yeah,
The test is divided up into these discrete bite-size questions.
yeah.
And in 5 minutes, you could give that question your full attention and you could get something out of it. Thank you, Leah. Last item on our agenda is put here from Matt. This is a quote from an LSAT for Word of the Week. The quote is, though the book is animated by a political fervor that is clearly moral, the author writes as if a political approach has to extirpate all moral considerations from any discussion of plagiarism. The word that we're meant to be trying to figure out here is extirpate. Extirpate. Extirpate.
Hmm.
Can you get that word from this context?
To me, it sounds like extract or remove.
Yep. The from, I think, here is a big clue.
Yeah,
The author writes as if a political approach has to extirpate all moral considerations from any discussion of plagiarism.
yeah,
So, another word that would work there is extract or remove.
hmm,
And it wouldn't be anything additive, right? It can't be adding or emphasizing because you wouldn't add from. You wouldn't
Yeah.
emphasize from.
Yeah.
So to extirpate something from something else kind of seems like it's being removed.
Yep.
Looking it up, the definition of extirpate, first definition I see here is to destroy completely or to wipe out.
Hmm.
Another definition is to pull up by the root. And yet another definition is to cut out by surgery. So you might
Okay.
extirpate tumor or you might extirpate weeds in your garden. Thanks,
Sounds
Matt,
good.
for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You can be LSAT famous. Please ask questions or share news with us on our website, thinkinglsat.com, or on socials at LSATdemon. Ask us what's up with Law School X, whatever law school you're thinking about. Send us a note and tell us you would like us to do a deep dive, especially if you send us some factoid about their school or something, a recruiting email that you've received. That's a perfect time for us to talk about how they're approaching you and how you should be approaching them. So again, just drop us a note at thinkinglsat.com. If you have questions about LSAT Demon, you can email help@lsatdemon.com. Please check out our other podcast, LSAT Demon Daily. That was episode 478 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.